I went into this with no real expectation, except that I was hoping it would be better than Moonfall, and it was. A few hours ago, I went to see the Thursday night preview of Uncharted, the latest movie with Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg, Antonio Banderas, some other actors I can't remember their names. And honestly, I went into this with no real expectation, except that I was hoping it would be better than Moonfall, and it was. Moonfall's like my low for this year, my just rock bottom. Anyway, I went into it already knowing that it seemed like it was getting some mixed reviews with some fans, and of course the critics aren't crazy about it. But I almost canceled my ticket because I was thinking maybe I'd rather go see The Cursed today instead of tomorrow, which is a horror movie that I'm going to go see tomorrow evening. I think it's about werewolves, and it looks really interesting. I haven't even seen a trailer for it yet, but it just looks interesting. Anyway, I decided not to cancel. I just went ahead and went to see it, and it was a fun time overall. I do have some issues with it, like I figured that I would. It felt, despite the high production quality of it and the fact that it's based on this very popular game, Uncharted, Nathan Drake, and it in a lot of ways, it almost felt like a generic sort of action film, maybe a skosh above, but definitely not of the level or at the level of a movie like Indiana Jones. That's what I was thinking about when I was watching this. I was comparing it to Indiana Jones. And I really feel like it's kind of hard to beat. Well, I wouldn't really say hard to beat the formula of Indiana Jones, because a lot of these sort of adventuring type of the quest sort of searching for, what is it they call them, MacGuffin type things, searching for these treasures or whatever. It's not like the formula that Indiana Jones set out hasn't been copied before. It's been copied many times, but there was something, or it's been done many times, but there was something about the way it was captured and just all the elements that came together, the way the story was woven, the way the characters were written, that just made it so effective and so well done. Unfortunately, Uncharted doesn't really, it just cannot hold a finger. Was that the right expression? It can't hold a candle, whatever. It can't compare to Indiana Jones stories. Maybe that's sort of putting too much expectation on it. Well, I didn't have that expectation, but what I mean is maybe that's an unfair comparison, but I do compare them because they are of the same type of genre of film. However, it was entertaining. Some stuff was really crazy and ridiculous, but it was still enjoyable. And I think a lot of that had to do with the chemistry between Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland. I felt like they pulled it off really well. I did watch Chris Stuckman's review of this, I think last night. And one thing that he was pointing out as sort of like a negative was that basically everybody in here was like a backstabber. You couldn't, except for Nathan Drake's character, for the most part, nobody could be trusted. And I guess that sort of got to be, I almost felt like it was like a running joke. I felt like that it was intentional. Well, obviously it was intentional because that's how it was written. But it was like happening all the time. And it was like, oh, okay, so they're betraying this person. Oh, okay, so he's getting betrayed again. Oh, okay, so she's betraying. It was like, after a while, I was like, come on. But anyway, that's kind of a minor quibble, honestly. It's just something that I did notice, and I think it was largely because Chris Stuckman had pointed it out. But anyway, the intro to this movie is pretty exciting. I'm sure you guys have probably already seen the trailer where it's showing the scene, the airplane, and the cargo in the airplane it's fallen out of the plane, but it's still attached by the harnesses and everything, and he's hanging on to it, and he gets flipped around a few times, and all this exciting stuff that's happening in the trailer. And the movie opens with that. It doesn't show you the conclusion, obviously, because this is one of those times where you get dropped into the middle of the action, and then it stops that scene, and then you go back to the past to see what led up to that moment. So the movie got started off with a bang, pretty much as far as that goes. And then we go back and we see Nathan Drake's character when he was a kid and the relationship he had with his brother. I don't know much of anything at all about the games. I don't know his backstory. I just know he's like a treasure hunter, adventurer guy. He's got this harness, the gun harness and whatever that he wears, and that Mark Wahlberg was supposed to play him. Mark Wahlberg, of course, does not play him. I almost feel like Mark Wahlberg would have been a better I don't know how I feel about being dropped into the young version of Nathan Drake. I guess it was done that way to appeal to the younger audiences because Tom Holland's pretty popular, and Spider-Man and everything. I'm feeling a little saturated, though, when it comes to Tom Holland. He's like, it feels like he's everywhere. He was in that Chaos something movie a year or two ago. He's been in all these Spider-Man movies, and I'm kind of feeling like I would like to see something different, someone different. I was feeling that way about some other, there was another actress that I specifically mentioned. I was getting like sort of exposure fatigue to them. It's like, Ana de Armas. It's like, she's everywhere. It's like, okay, Ana, I've seen you, been watching you for years now. I first was introduced to her in El Internado before she even jumped over into the English market. And speaking of El Internado, there's an actor in here who plays Antonio Banderas' dad. He was from El Internado. He's a really good actor. He's got a very distinctive delivery and voice and his look and everything. I mean, he makes a good villain. He wasn't necessarily a villain in here, but I'm saying is he has like a really good villainy quality to him. You'll know him when you see him because it shows him in a few scenes in here. But anyway, so we get introduced to Nathan Drake when he's young. He and his brother, they get separated. Then we pick up with him. Later, we see that Nathan Drake is like this pickpocket, okay? He works at like a bar or something, and he steals from people, and then he meets Mark Wahlberg, and they join up to go on this hunt for this treasure that Nathan Drake's brother had been looking for as well. So that's how he gets pulled into it. But one of the first things that I noticed that I wrote down in my little list of sort of issues that I had with just not necessarily just issues, but anything that stood out to me that I wanted to mention. Some of the pickpocketing setups were a stretch, and not just with Nathan, but there was another situation that happened where something was lifted off of Nathan, and at least two of the situations that I can think of, one with Nathan, one with this other person, it was really a stretch because there was no indication at all that they had even gotten close enough to lift this particular item off the person. So it was like, okay, I mean, that you could say, well, they just didn't show it, but they were never close enough for this to happen. So that was like, all right, that's someone screwed up on the filming of that, because it's like, okay, there's no way. Anyway, another thing, most of the issues that I had with this were things like incongruity problems, stuff like that. Also, there was a scene where Nathan and this girl, they're in this bar, and they end up getting into like a fight. They put their bags down, they escape the place, and then it never showed them picking up their bags, and then they have their stuff with them again. Stuff like that. I noticed things like that. Another thing, there's multiple times that Nathan ends up in the water. He's got his phone on him and it doesn't die. There's no indication either about the phone being waterproof or having a waterproof case on it, but yet it works perfectly fine. Never dies. It can be tracked. All of that, stuff like that. with regard to the choreography, the action, it was pretty well done. Tom Holland is very athletic, and a lot of the things that he did in here reminded me of parkour, like the way he would jump off certain objects and use the scenery around him as a tool in the stuff that he was doing, the fighting or whatever. The plane scene that happens, the action scene in the plane, the one that we open up with, and then of course eventually we get around to it, I thought that was pretty well done, how it was choreographed, the events that happened, the different characters and how they played into that scene. And, you know, the tension really amping up because, you know, they're high in the air, things are dangling out of the plane, you know. I mean, it was pretty, but I get a little nervous about up high things. Like I don't know that well, yeah, maybe I am a little bit. What's the word? Oh, Lord. I can't think of the word for fear of heights, but I'm not a big fan of fight scenes that happen up in the air. However, this one was done pretty well. You do have to really, really suspend and stretch your sense of disbelief because it's just like, okay, there's no way. But anyway, it is at least written in such a way that you can see that, all right, I can see how they made it out of this situation. But one thing that just stood out to me is Nathan Drake, he's physically fit and everything, but he's not necessarily a fighter. It never really presented him as being someone like that, and yet he's this really good fighter all of a sudden. And then when he's in the air and he's having to dive through the air and try to aim himself, he all of a sudden can do this just perfectly, pretty much. It just kind of like, they should have at least explained, maybe he was somehow taking some martial arts training, and so he knew how to move his body in these ways. But I don't know, unless I missed something that was said in passing in the beginning, I just found that a little bit hard to believe with regard to his character. And then also how when he puts on his signature harness or the gun holster or whatever, I think I called it a harness in the beginning, the gun holster, and then he's using a gun and all of a sudden he's a gun expert. He knows perfectly well how to handle a gun. He knows exactly what to do. It's just stuff like that. Also, some other little inconsistencies. Oh, with regard to things like that, suddenly being an expert, the character played by Mark Wahlberg, his name is Sully. At some point, he pilots a helicopter, but I don't remember there being any mention at all of him being able to fly a helicopter, and then suddenly he can do it just fine. I think there is something he said during that particular moment, which sort of could be taken as an indication that he did know how to pilot an aircraft, at least in the past. He said something like still got it or whatever. So I can kind of let that slide, but it had never been mentioned before. So all of a sudden he's handling the controls and he's doing just fine with it. And I'm like, So these were the things that were piling up. The scene with the helicopters, as you've probably seen in the trailer, and they're carrying these ships, well, not really ships, like these, well, boats. I mean, they're, you know, like exploring from way back when, like like Magellan or Drake's or somebody's, shoot, I can't remember whose they were supposed to be. Maybe, I don't remember if they were Magellan's or not, whatever. They're carrying them through the air. The choreography of that, the way that played out was pretty cool. I'd never really seen something like that from what I could remember, but it was neat how that was carried off. The fighting that was going on and the back and forth in the boats and what they were doing and trying to, you know, maneuver through the air and avoid each other, and then also avoid the rocks, you know, in the water and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty well done. Like I said, it's, you know, it's above generic, but it's just not up there with the best of the best, which in my opinion is probably Indiana Jones as far as these types of movies go. What else? Some of the plot was kind of predictable, of course, but there was at least one thing that happened that completely threw me off guard. Was not expecting it. You'll probably know it when it happens, so I'm definitely not going to get anything away or give anything away. What else? Another inconsistency. There's this scene where one of the bad people, she's a bad lady, and she has this knife. She gets knocked out of the way, and of course, because she had her knife, she would have dropped it. And then in the next moment, when she's back up and like climbing back up after Nathan Drake or whatever, she pulls her harness out of her harness. She pulls her knife out of like the sheath. And so I was like, that's, that what? So I tried to explain it in my mind as that maybe she had multiple knives, maybe, but like little editing issues like that I noticed, or inconsistencies in the objects that the people were dealing with. Those started to add up for me and kind of got under my skin a little bit. Certainly not enough to make me dislike this film outright. It was enjoyable. I don't know. I feel like maybe fans of the game might be disappointed in it, according to what I've picked up on online in discussions. But I think that for the most part, general audience members like myself will probably enjoy it. It's fun. It's like your typical sort of popcorn movie, And so, hopefully it'll do well. This is a high budget movie. And, we're in times that aren't 100% back to normal, so I don't know. But I'm feeling like this is probably going to be the number one movie this weekend. I guess we'll find out. But I feel like this movie could have been better. So that's just my take on it. I didn't really I didn't really love it, didn't really hate it. Just kind of in between. There were some moments I certainly liked about it. And the acting in here. Oh yeah, another thing I was going to say. I really appreciated that in scenes involving the bad girl, the bad lady with right there, the girl with the knife. When they were fighting with her, even though she's a woman or whatever, they didn't hold back. They were doing whatever they could to try to harm her just as much as she was trying to harm them. So I appreciated that. It's like, don't hold back just because there's a woman trying to kill you. Just, you got to protect yourself. And so certainly some of the fight choreography with her was pretty, like she was getting thrown all around and slammed into this glass wall. And it was just, I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I think that's it. I think I've gone through everything I wrote down. I knew there was something that I meant to say. I even wrote it down when it happened during the movie. The fellow who plays the voice of Nathan Drake in all of the games and everything, he does make a cameo appearance. You guys may already know that. But when I saw him at first, I thought he was Bob Odenkirk. And then I was like, no, that's not him. And then I was, oh, it's that guy. It's him. So yes, he does show up. The scene is very quick, but he has this line in there that's kind of funny, given the character that he played and who he's supposed to be in this particular movie. You'll know what I mean when you get to it. Okay, that's it. Back to the review. It's sort of like a meh film, but not as bad as a meh, 100% meh. Maybe between meh and, yeah, I liked it a lot. Maybe. Oh yeah, if you go to see this, there are post-credits scenes, at least 2. And I only knew that because I looked it up before the credits came on and knew that there was one right after it ends, and then a little bit into the credits, there's another. The source that I read indicated there were only 2. I did not stay to the end of the credits because I had to come back home, had to do some stuff, wanted to film this review, then I got to go back out later. So be sure to stick around for that if you go watch it. So anyway, like I said earlier, just a few moments ago, I don't think I have anything else. So, I do know what I was going to say. I was going to ask you guys, whoever among you are fans of the Uncharted game series, if you get a chance to watch this, what did you think about it? I'm curious to find out what fans of the game think about it. I have a feeling, like I mentioned, that the fans of the game are not going to like it nearly as much as regular audience, as a regular audience members. Kind of like how Terminator Dark Fate. It was a decent enough action film, but it was an absolutely horrendous Terminator movie. People that aren't really invested in Terminator enjoyed it more than, like, let's say someone like myself. I absolutely hated that movie and I refused to add it to my digital or physical collection. Unless my brother ends up adding it to the library, to the digital library. I'm not going to outlay any money for it. So anyway, that was it. I'm definitely wrapping up now, you guys. Adios.